33 years ago, I was born, and according to my parents, I probably started to stutter as soon as I talked. This was around the age of 2 or 3. And of course, at the time, I didn't really think about it. I was a very happy child. I just kept going with my life, and nobody in my age group really noticed, of course, because we were thinking about all kinds of other stuff. And then in grade 6, I switched from English elementary school to a French one. And this is really where I probably became conscious for the first time. I can remember a presentation in particular where I was in front of the class, and I kind of, the first time, sort of linked how I was talking with how people looked at me. And there was probably a few laughs and things like that. And that kind of began my conscious journey with my stutter. And I then went into high school, and as many of you know, high school can be very difficult for us. And so I was made fun of a lot. A lot of people laughed, and I had some good friends, and I did have some happy times, but this period in my life really marked me for a long time. I had tried different forms of therapy all through elementary school and high school, but I always kind of felt misunderstood, and possibly too, I was young, so I wasn't taking anything very seriously. But ultimately, I felt very alone. I didn't know anybody else really who had this problem, so I didn't really feel understood at all. And good news, though, when I moved on to college at the age of 17 or so, I switched back to an English school, and I made new friends. I've very quickly just, I think being in a new setting really helped me, and I achieved absolute fluency. I didn't really think about my stuttering anymore. Life was good, and I moved on. That lasted for 2 years, and I had very little fear. I was able to do presentations with absolutely no problem, and I continued to build more and more fluency memories, which was great. Then I moved on to university. So in Canada, college and university are not always the same thing. And I lost all of my college friends, and I began to experience a great drop in creating new fluency memories. And my speech crashed, of course, and I began to fall back into a lot of the same bad habits that I used to have before. Within 6 months, I was, I would say, completely relapsed. And this began another pretty difficult period in my life. I reached out for help again. I saw a psychologist and a hypnotherapist, and nothing really connected with me. Maybe it was the individuals that I worked with. Maybe, again, I was quite young, in my late teens, early 20s. And I think for hypnotherapy, too, I was expecting something a little bit more dramatic, of course. And, when that doesn't happen, you're like, this doesn't work, right? So I just quit. Looking back, that was probably a mistake. But anyway, overall, I was just kind of hovering through life, not really in control, as many as you can relate, I'm sure. And I felt as though my friends and family were reminders of my problem, of my stutter. And I began to kind of almost resent them, in a way that wasn't fair, of course, because all this was in my mind of my own making. And being in a point where you resent your loved ones, where you resent your life is not a good place to be. So again, I was in a bit of a slump. I took a leap of faith at this point. I was 23 years old, and I moved away to another province quite far away, about 1,000 kilometers away. And again, I met new friends, new faces, and nobody knew about my issues. So I achieved absolute fluency once again. And even on visits back home to see my family friends there, the fluency memories that I had created in my new home were always enough to get me through. And yeah, I felt so confident that at that point I wanted to pursue my education a little bit further. So I decided to move back near my hometown to do a master's degree. And so I went to grad school, yeah, um, near Montreal. And as soon as I kind of moved back to that familiar setting, of course, a lot of the same issues came back. And I fell into bad habits once again with my speech. And I knew that with my master's degree, I had some presentations I had to make, of course. I had to defend my thesis eventually. I had a pretty large presentation for my thesis proposal, all that. And I knew that I had to find a solution. So I remember a book that my mother had given me quite a few years back, but it wasn't Lee's. My journey is a little bit longer than that. You're going to have to bear with me. But it was from an American author, and he founded an international program for stuttering that is very much based on week-long intensive courses. So I did quite a few of those. I flew all over the place to all over North America and once to Europe to do those. And I must admit that these methods did help me some with my graduate degree to get through some of the presentations. But I had to talk very unnaturally, like a robot, as you were introduced to earlier. And it was very expensive. And I always kind of felt like I was taking one step forward, two back, in the sense that their methods, and I'm not going to name the program here, but those of you who were in it probably know what I'm talking about. But anyway, I kind of always felt like the program continually reminded you of your problem because they kind of practiced stuttering on purpose in a sense. And so it was a lot of work, and it kind of wasn't very lasting for me. And so I did get through my master's degree, and at the time I was trying to make this method work, but it just wasn't happening. In the meantime, I moved back to where I am right now, so away from my hometown. But this time I brought my girlfriend, who's now my fiance, otherwise would be my wife if it was not for COVID. And also my brother followed me. So I had some reminders from my earlier life kind of come with me, and my fluency didn't just automatically come back as it did in earlier years. So I continued to struggle. Of course, moving to a new location, I had to find a job. So I did a few interviews, and some of them went okay. Some of them were quite rough. And the other method just wasn't really working for me anymore. Again, emphasize that. So I turned to this guy who had messaged me on Facebook, or he added me on Facebook something. Anyway, it was Lee. And so that's where we come to Lee in my story. And we began to chat on Messenger a little bit. You know, he introduced his book and his methods. So then we began to video chat. I read his book, which at the time was his second edition, I believe. And it really didn't take me long to realize that Lee had something very, very unique here, and also very working and worth a shot for me. So I really found like Lee got it. He got me. And I finally found a method that I could progressively work towards eliminating my fears, which for me were always linked to my speech. And I didn't have to speak unnaturally, didn't cost lots of money, and I didn't have to fly to all kinds of exotic locations. So that'd be nice sometimes, but it's also money. Within a few months, I posted my SS on the website, and here I am a couple of years later. What I have a little bit more to say. What worked for me, the crutches really helped me get through blocks, of course, and there's a couple that I use more than others, but we can chat about that later. More so, doing auto-suggestion treatments every day for me has made a huge difference. I employ them in the morning and at night, and possibly more than anything, just Lee's philosophy that you can let go of the past and that neuroplasticity is something that's possible, and that you can move forward one fluency memory at a time. For me, this made a lot of sense, and I went with it, and here I am now. I did have some close calls to relapsing, I'll be honest, in 2020, because it was a tough year, as I'm sure many of you can relate. I lost my job at the time. I had to postpone my wedding, and I couldn't travel really to see some friends and some family that weren't living near me. So in late 2020, I decided I needed to roll up my sleeves once again, and I really wanted to focus this time around on my mind training. So I began with rereading Lee's book, and this was the 3rd edition now, which was much improved. And I read also Alvin Power's Guide to Self-Hypnosis, and I'm looking forward to incorporating those tools into my life. And I also joined SAC, of course, a couple months ago. And I really like SAC. It seems like a great place for us to help each other and to improve together. And as Vikram noted, I would love to become a certified coach, and so that's something that I'm working on right now. I have a little bit of ways to go, but that's a goal of mine. Some other goals of mine are to completely eliminate any fear that I have in my life related to my speech. I haven't had an incident where I appeared disabled for quite a long time, months really, and so, but I still have some fear, and I want to truly be able to say that I love to speak everywhere, every time. I can say that, but I can't say that in the sense that I'm confident that I'll always feel that way. And so I think I still probably have a few cracks up there that I need to fill. And so that's another one of my goals. I also love to use mind training in other aspects of my life. And so I can just improve overall as an individual. And I hope I smiled enough. That was one thing I really wanted to do during my presentation. And I thank you all for listening.